The Odyssey drifted silently through space, its battered hull bearing the scars of battle. The Exitherian fleet was gone, retreating into the depths of the galaxy. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the crew could breathe. Captain Alan Drake stood on the bridge, staring at the empty view screen where the enemy ships had been moments before. It wasn't over, not completely, but they had won something far more valuable than a fight. Time. "Damage report," Drake said, breaking the silence. Lieutenant Rachel Monroe glanced up from her console. "Shields are down to 10%. Hull breaches on decks 4 and 6 have been sealed, but we've lost primary weapon systems. Life support is holding steady, for now." Dr. Emily Ross added, "The pulse emitter is offline. It'll take days to repair, maybe longer." Drake nodded grimly. The Odyssey was a shadow of the ship it had been when they left Earth, but she had brought them this far. That was enough. "Set a course for Earth," he ordered. "We've done all we can out here." Ensign Daniel Hayes turned to the helm controls, his hand steady despite the exhaustion etched on his face. The engines roared to life, propelling the warship toward home. Behind them, the gas giant shrank into the distance, its rings glinting faintly in the starlight. Back on Earth, news of the Odyssey stand spread like wildfire. Broadcasts showed images of the damaged ship limping home, its crew hailed as heroes. President Laura Bennett addressed the world from the steps of the United Earth Council building, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "The bravery of the Odyssey reminds us that humanity is stronger than fear," she declared. "They faced an enemy that sought to destroy us, and they stopped them cold. Let their courage inspire us all." As the Odyssey approached Earth's orbit, the planet came into view, a fragile blue sphere hanging against the blackness of space. For the crew, it was a sight they hadn't been sure they'd see again. Tears welled in some eyes, while others simply stared in quiet awe. When the ship finally docked, the crew stepped onto the platform to a hero's welcome. Thousands of people had gathered, waving flags and cheering. Among them were families, friends, and strangers, all united by gratitude. Drake led his officers down the ramp, his expression calm but proud. He paused at the bottom, turning to address the crowd. "This victory belongs to all of you," he said, his voice carrying over the cheers. "We fought not just for ourselves, but for every person who looked up at the stars and refused to give up hope. Humanity endured because we stood together." Behind him, Chief Paul Carter wiped sweat from his brow, leaning heavily on a cane. His engineers had worked miracles to keep the ship running, and though he was exhausted, he couldn't stop smiling. Dr. Ross clutched her data pad tightly, her mind already racing with ideas for future defenses, and Lieutenant Monroe stood tall, her tactical expertise having saved them more times than anyone could count. In the weeks that followed, Earth began to rebuild. New alliances formed, uniting colonies and nations under a single banner. The Odyssey became a symbol of resilience, its story told and retold across the planet. But the crew knew their mission wasn't truly over. The Exitherians would return someday. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. For now, though, there was peace. Across the globe, people celebrated not just survival, but hope. Deep in space, the stars burned bright, indifferent to the struggles below. But aboard the Odyssey and in the hearts of those who called Earth home, hope burned brighter still. The Exitherian fleet lingered at the edge of the gas giant's orbit, their movements uncertain. Captain Alan Drake watched them closely from the bridge of the Odyssey. The enemy ships hadn't fired in several minutes, and their hesitation was unusual. For a species that thrived on domination, this pause was unsettling and telling. "They're not retreating," Lieutenant Rachel Monroe said, her voice cautious as she studied the tactical display. "But they're not attacking either." Dr. Emily Ross leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Maybe they're debating what to do next. That message we sent, it might have planted doubt." Drake nodded slowly. Doubt was a powerful weapon, especially against an enemy that relied on overwhelming force and absolute confidence. If the Exetherians were questioning themselves, it gave humanity a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. Keep monitoring their communications, Drake ordered. If they're talking among themselves, I want to know what they're saying. Ross immediately got to work, tapping into the ship's sensors to intercept any signals. After a few tense moments, she looked up, her eyes wide. Captain, you need to hear this. She played the recording over the bridge speakers. It was garbled at first, filled with static and strange tones unique to the Scytherian language. But fragments came through clearly. Arguments, disagreements, even outright defiance. Some voices called for retreat, claiming the humans were too unpredictable. Others demanded retaliation, insisting that victory was still within reach. They're divided, Ross said, her voice soft but urgent. Their unity is cracking. Drake exhaled slowly, processing the information. This was more than just a tactical advantage. It was an opportunity. If the Scytherians were no longer acting as one cohesive force, they were vulnerable. And vulnerability could be exploited. Dr. Ross, Drake said, turning to her, can we amplify these transmissions? Make sure every ship in their fleet hears them. Ross hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but it'll take some time. We'll need to boost the signal without alerting them. Do it, Drake replied firmly. And while you're at it, add something else to the broadcast. Monroe raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking, sir? Dr. Ross caught on quickly. Earth's culture, she said, her voice tinged with excitement. Music, art, literature, anything that shows them who we are. Drake nodded. Exactly. Let's remind them that we're not just a target. We're people. Maybe they've forgotten what it means to create instead of destroy. The crew sprang into action. Ross gathered recordings of Earth's greatest achievements, symphonies, paintings, poetry, all condensed into a single transmission. Meanwhile, Monroe worked on amplifying the intercepted Scytherian signals, ensuring the entire fleet would hear both their own dissent and humanity's message. As the broadcast went live, the bridge fell silent. Outside, the Exetherian ships remained motionless, their weapons powered down. For hours, there was no response. Drake paced back and forth, his mind racing. Had the message worked, or had they made a fatal mistake by showing their hand? Finally, a new signal came through, not aggressive, but calm. The Exetherians were requesting communication. They want to talk, Ross said, her voice trembling slightly. This has never happened before. Drake took a deep breath. Put them on screen. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a Scytherian figure. Its form was alien, sleek, and metallic, with glowing lines running across its surface. But its tone, translated through the ship's systems, was surprisingly measured. You have proven yourselves worthy opponents, the Exetherian said. We underestimated your kind. Perhaps conquest is not our only path. Drake stepped closer, his expression unreadable. Then leave us in peace. Humanity doesn't seek war, but we will defend ourselves. The Exetherian paused, as if considering the words. Then, after a long moment, it nodded. We will withdraw for now. But know this, we will return if provoked. With that, the transmission ended. The Exetherian fleet began to move, turning away from the gas giant and disappearing into the void. On the bridge, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. They had forced the Exetherians to reconsider their mission. It wasn't victory, but it was hope. Drake turned to his officers, his voice steady. We've bought ourselves time. Let's make sure we use it wisely. Outside, the stars burned bright, indifferent to the struggles below. But aboard the Odyssey hope burned brighter still. The destruction of the Exetherian dreadnought sent a shockwave through the void, its massive form breaking apart in a fiery explosion. The Odyssey hovered at a safe distance, its crew watching as the enemy fleet struggled to recover. For a moment, it seemed like the tide had turned. But Captain Alan Drake knew better than to celebrate too soon. "They're regrouping," Lieutenant Rachel Monroe said, her voice sharp with urgency. She pointed to the tactical display, where the remaining Scytherian ships were pulling back into formation. "They're not done yet." Dr. Emily Ross leaned over the console, her face pale but determined. "That pulse drained our reserves. We can't fire again, not without risking a meltdown." Drake clenched his fists. The trap had worked, but it wasn't enough to finish the fight. The Exitherians still outnumbered them, and their weapons were still deadly. If they stayed in range for too long, the Odyssey would be torn apart. "Hayes," Drake called out, turning to the helmsman. "Get us behind the gas giant. Use the rings for cover." Ensign Daniel Hayes nodded, his hand steady on the controls. The Odyssey surged forward, weaving through the debris field that surrounded the planet. Behind them, the Exitherians fired blindly, their beams slicing through space but missing their mark. In engineering, Chief Paul Carter fought to keep the ship running. The pulse emitter had pushed the reactors to their limits, and warning alarms blared throughout the compartment. Sparks flew from overloaded panels, forcing Carter and his team to scramble. "We're losing containment on Reactor 1, an engineer shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Carter didn't hesitate. Grabbing a fire extinguisher, he doused the flames before turning back to his team. "Rear out power from non-essential systems. Seal off Section 7 if you have to. We need to stabilize this core." His voice carried authority, snapping everyone into action. Together, they worked feverishly, patching leaks and rerouting energy flows. For now, the engines held, but it was only a matter of time before something gave. On the bridge, Drake studied the situation carefully. The Exitherians were cautious now, wary of another ambush. Their movements were slower, more deliberate. He could see doubt creeping into their tactics, a crack in their armor. "They're hesitating," Monroe said, her eyes scanning the tactical display. "They don't know what to expect next." "Good," Drake replied. "Let's make sure they stay that way." He turned to Ross. "Can we broadcast a message? Something to confuse them further?" Ross hesitated, then nodded. "We can transmit static or false signals. Make them think there are more ships nearby." "Do it," Drake ordered. "Keep them guessing." As the Odyssey slipped behind the gas giant's rings, the crew prepared for another strike. Ross worked quickly, setting up the false transmissions while Monroe plotted firing solutions. Outside, the Exitherian fleet hesitated, unsure whether to pursue or retreat. Finally, Drake gave the order. "Hayes, bring us around. Target their command ship." The Odyssey emerged from behind the gas giant, its weapons charging. The Exitherians reacted immediately, their ships turning to face the threat. But it was too late. The human warship unleashed everything it had, striking the command ship's weakened shields. Explosions erupted across its hull, crippling its systems. "This is Captain Alan Drake of the SS Odyssey *", Drake said, his voice firm as he opened a channel to the enemy fleet. "Surrender or face total annihilation." For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the Exitherian ships began to pull back. They didn't retreat entirely, but their movements suggested hesitation, uncertainty. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. On the bridge, the crew let out a collective breath. They weren't safe yet, but they had proven something vital. Humanity could stand against even the greatest odds. Drake turned to his officers, his expression grim but resolute. "We've bought ourselves some time. Let's use it wisely." Outside, the stars burned bright, indifferent to the struggles below. But aboard the Odyssey, hope burned brighter still. The Odyssey limped through space, its engines sputtering as the crew worked tirelessly to keep it operational. Captain Alan Drake stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen. The Exitherian fleet had retreated for now, but he knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. They were too powerful, too determined to let a single human warship stand in their way. "We need a plan," Drake said aloud, though his words were more to himself than anyone else. "We can't just run forever." Lieutenant Rachel Monroe glanced up from her console. "What about setting a trap? We've seen how they react to our tactics. Maybe we can use that against them." Drake's eyes narrowed. A trap. It was risky, but it might work. If they could lure the Exitherians into a vulnerable position, they might have a chance to strike another blow, perhaps even end the fight once and for all. "Explain," Drake said, turning to face her. Monroe leaned forward, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the tactical display. "We used debris from the last battle to create decoys. Project holograms of ships, make them think we have reinforcements. Draw them into an ambush near the gas giant." Dr. Emily Ross stepped closer, catching on quickly. It could work. The gravity well around the gas giant would limit their mobility. If we position ourselves carefully, we could strike from behind while they're distracted. Drake nodded slowly. "It's dangerous. If they see through the ruse, we're finished." "It's worth the risk," Ross insisted. Her voice was firm, betraying none of the fear she felt. "We don't have any other options." Drake turned to Ensign Daniel Hayes at the helm. "Can you plot a course to the gas giant without drawing attention?" Hayes hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir. But it'll take some finesse. Their sensors are still scanning the area." "Do it," Drake ordered. "And tell engineering to start prepping the decoy systems. We'll need every trick we've got." In engineering, Chief Paul Carter groaned when he heard the order. His team was already stretched thin, patching leaks and stabilizing systems. Creating holographic projections would push them to their limits. But he didn't argue. Instead, he rallied his crew, barking instructions and diving back into the chaos. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Drake and his officers fine-tuned the plan. Using data from the previous battles, they mapped out positions for the decoys, ensuring they looked convincing enough to fool the Exitherians. Ross worked on enhancing the holograms, adding subtle details to make them appear real. Flashing lights, exhaust trails, even simulated weapon fire. As the hours passed, the Odyssey approached the gas giant. Its massive form loomed ahead, swirling storms visible even from a distance. The crew positioned the ship behind one of the planet's rings, using the dense debris as cover. Then, with a flick of a switch, the decoys sprang to life. Dozens of phantom ships appearing in the void, surrounding the Exitherian fleet. "They're taking the bait," Monroe said, her voice tense with anticipation. On the tactical display, the enemy ships began to shift, moving toward the holograms. Their movements were cautious at first, but soon they committed fully, spreading out to engage the fake fleet. Drake allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Now, let's finish this." The Odyssey slipped silently around the gas giant, positioning itself behind the largest Exitherian dreadnought. The massive ship loomed ahead, its weapons trained on the decoys. Unaware of the danger lurking behind it, the dreadnought continued firing, wasting precious energy on illusions. "Ready the pulse emitter," Drake ordered. "Ross, you've got one shot. Make it count." Ross nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the controls. Target locked. Frequency calibrated. "All hands, brace for impact," Drake called out. He turned to Hayes. "Bring us in close. Fire when ready." The Odyssey surged forward, emerging from behind the gas giant like a predator stalking its prey. Before the Exitherians could react, the pulse emitter unleashed its energy wave, washing over the dreadnought's shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash, the shields collapsed, leaving the massive ship exposed. "Fire everything," Drake shouted. The Odyssey's weapons roared to life, striking the dreadnought's core. Explosions rippled across its hull, tearing it apart from the inside. The shockwave rocked the entire fleet, sending smaller ships spiraling out of control. On the bridge, cheers erupted as the crew watched the enemy crumble. But Drake silenced them with a raised hand. "Stay sharp. This isn't over yet." Outside, the remaining Scytherian ships scrambled to regroup. The trap had worked, but the fight was far from finished. The Odyssey drifted in the aftermath of the collision, its battered hull groaning under the strain of battle. Smoke filled the corridors, and emergency lights flickered weakly. Yet somehow, the ship and its crew had survived. Captain Alan Drake stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the railing as he stared out at the wreckage. The Scytherian cruiser they had rammed was gone, reduced to a cloud of debris. Around them, the enemy fleet lingered, their movements cautious and uncertain. "They're not firing," Lieutenant Rachel Monroe said, her voice soft with disbelief. She studied the tactical display, watching as the remaining Scytherian ships regrouped but made no move to attack. "They're retreating." Dr. Emily Ross stepped closer, her face pale but resolute. "Maybe we've shaken them. They've never faced anything like this before." Drake shook his head. "Don't count on it. They're just regrouping. We hit them hard, but they're not done yet." Even so, the brief pause gave the crew a chance to breathe. In engineering, Chief Paul Carter worked tirelessly to stabilize the ship's systems. The collision had pushed the engines to their absolute limit, and coolant leaks threatened to shut them down entirely. His team moved quickly, patching ruptured lines and rerouting power where they could. "Captain," Carter's voice crackled over the comms, "we've got basic propulsion back online, but it's shaky. If we push too hard, we'll blow the core." "Understood," Drake replied. He turned to Hayes at the helm. "Keep us steady for now. No sudden moves." As the immediate danger faded, the reality of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The Odyssey had faced an overwhelming force and survived. Not just survived, but struck a significant blow. For the first time, the Scytherians had been forced to hesitate. It wasn't victory, but it was hope. Back on Earth, news of the battle spread like wildfire. Despite the chaos of war, signals from the front lines reached home, carrying reports of the Odyssey's daring stand. Across the planet, people watched broadcasts of the damaged warship limping away from Taw City, its crew hailed as heroes. President Laura Bennett addressed the world, her voice firm, but filled with emotion. "The bravery of the Odyssey reminds us that humanity is stronger than fear," she declared. "We will not give up. We will not surrender." On board the ship, Drake allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought about the sacrifices his crew had made, the risks they had taken, the lives they had risked. Each one of them had risen to the challenge, proving that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. "We've inspired them," Ross said softly, breaking the silence on the bridge. She gestured to the view screen, where distant stars twinkled against the blackness of space. "Not just Earth, but everyone who hears about this. Maybe even the Scytherians." Drake nodded slowly. "Maybe. But inspiration alone won't win this war. We need more than hope. We need a plan." Monroe looked up from her console. "What's next, sir? Do we fall back to Earth?" "For now," Drake replied. "But I want every piece of data we've gathered analyzed, every weakness we found documented. If there's a way to exploit their shields again, or find new ones, we'll use it." Ross nodded eagerly. "I'll get started right away." As the hours passed, the crew worked to repair the ship while preparing for whatever came next. The Scytherians might have retreated for the moment, but everyone knew they would return. And when they did, the Odyssey had to be ready. In the mess hall, Carter sat with a few members of his team, sharing a rare moment of calm. "You know," he said, raising a cup of lukewarm coffee and a mock toast, "if we make it out of this alive, I'm retiring somewhere warm." His teammates laughed, though the sound was tinged with exhaustion. For now, laughter was enough, a reminder that they were still alive, still fighting. Drake walked among them later, offering a nod or a word of thanks to each crew member he passed. He didn't say much, but his presence spoke volumes. Together, they had proven something vital. Humanity could stand against the darkness, and as long as they kept fighting, there was a chance, however small, that they might prevail. Outside, the stars burned bright, indifferent to the struggles of those below. But aboard the Odyssey, hope burned brighter still. The Odyssey surged forward, its weapons blazing as the Exitherian fleet reeled from the effects of the frequency pulse. For a brief moment, chaos ruled the battlefield. Dozens of enemy ships floated unprotected, their shields flickering and failing. The crew of the Odyssey seized the opportunity, unleashing everything they had at the stunned invaders. "Target their engines," Captain Alan Drake barked, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. "Disable as many as you can." Lieutenant Rachel Monroe didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew over the tactical console, locking onto the nearest Exitherian cruiser. The Odyssey phasers sliced through space, striking the enemy ship's propulsion systems. One by one, the massive vessels slowed to a crawl, crippled but not destroyed. Dr. Emily Ross stood nearby, her eyes glued to the sensor readings. "Their shields are still down," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "The pulse worked better than I expected." "It's not enough," Drake replied sharply. He turned to Ensign Daniel Hayes at the helm. "Keep us moving. Don't let them get a lock on us." Hayes nodded, his hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The Odyssey darted between the larger ships, using their bulk as cover while delivering precise strikes. Explosions lit up the void as more Exitherian vessels fell victim to the human warship's relentless assault. But the victory came at a cost. Back in engineering, Chief Paul Carter fought to keep the ship running. The strain of continuous combat was taking its toll. Power fluctuations surged through the systems, and coolant lines burst under the pressure. Sparks rained down from overloaded panels, forcing Carter and his team to scramble. "We're losing containment on Reactor 2. One of the engineers shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Carter didn't flinch. Grabbing a fire extinguisher, he doused the flames before turning back to his team. "Reroute power from non-essential systems. If that reactor goes, we're all dead." His voice carried authority, snapping everyone into action. Together, they worked feverishly to stabilize the core, buying precious seconds for the crew above. On the bridge, alarms blared as the Exitherians began to recover. Their shields flickered back online, albeit weakly, and their weapons resumed firing. A barrage of energy beams struck the Odyssey, shaking the entire ship violently. Smoke filled the air, and several consoles sparked and died. "Shields at 20%, Monroe yelled over the noise. "We can't take much more of this." Drake clenched his fists, his mind racing. They had done significant damage to the enemy fleet, but it wasn't enough to turn the tide. The Exitherians were adapting too quickly. Another direct hit would finish them off. Then, over the comms, Carter's voice crackled through the chaos. "Captain, I've got bad news. The engines are overheating. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they shut down completely." Drake closed his eyes for a split second, steeling himself. "Understood. Get what time you can out of them." "That's an order." He turned to Monroe. "Can we fire the pulse again?" She shook her head, not without overloading the emitter. "We'd be lucky to survive another shot." Drake gritted his teeth. There was only one option left, a desperate gamble. "Hayes, plot a collision course with the nearest cruiser." The helmsman froze, his face pale. "Sir." "You heard me," Drake said firmly. "Full speed ahead. Aim for their midsection. If we go down, we're taking them with us." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what was being asked of them. This was no longer just a mission. It was a sacrifice. As the Odyssey accelerated toward the target, the Exotherians finally realized what was happening. Their weapons fired wildly, trying to stop the charging warstock. But it was too late. The human ship plowed into the cruiser, shattering its hull in a spectacular explosion. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a transmission crackled through the void. It was Carter, his voice strained but triumphant. Engines gave out just in time. We made it. Drake exhaled slowly, realizing they were still alive. The collision had been close enough to destroy the enemy ship, but far enough to spare the Odyssey. Around them, the remaining Exotherians hesitated, unsure how to respond. "We did it," Monroe whispered, tears streaming down her face. Drake allowed himself a small smile. "Not yet, but we've bought ourselves some time." In engineering, Carter leaned against a wall, exhausted but alive. His sacrifice, and the sacrifices of his team, had kept the ship running long enough to see this day. And though the battle wasn't over, they had proven something vital. Humanity could fight back. The explosion of the Exotherian patrol ship echoed through the void, a brief but brilliant flash that lit up the darkness. For a moment, the crew of the Odyssey allowed themselves to feel a flicker of hope. They had done it. They had found a way to weaken the enemy's shields. But Captain Alan Drake knew better than to let that hope linger too long. The Exotherians were already responding, their ships moving with alarming speed toward the source of the blast. "Shields back online," Lieutenant Rachel Monroe reported, her voice sharp as she monitored the tactical display. "But they're still at 40%. We can't take another hit like before." Dr. Emily Ross stood beside her, gripping the edge of the console tightly. Her face was pale, though her eyes burned with determination. "It worked," she said softly, almost to herself. "The pulse, it actually worked." "It did," Drake acknowledged, his tone measured. He turned to the view screen, where the massive forms of the Exotherian fleet loomed closer. "But now they know we've got something new. And trust me, they'll adapt quickly." Monroe nodded grimly. "They're spreading out again. Looks like they're trying to flush us out." Drake clenched his fists. The Odyssey couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, they'd have to face the full might of the Exotherian armada. But for now, survival was the priority. "Hayes," he called to the helmsman, "keep us in the asteroids. Use every rock, every shadow. Make them work for it." "Aye, sir," Ensign Daniel Hayes replied, his hand steady on the controls despite the tension in the air. The Odyssey slipped deeper into the asteroid field, weaving between jagged rocks and debris. Behind them, the Exotherians fired blindly, their energy beams slicing through space and obliterating chunks of floating stone. In the engineering bay, Chief Paul Carter worked frantically to keep the ship running. The earlier hits had taken their toll. Hull breaches sealed with emergency patches, coolant lines leaking, and power fluctuations threatening to shut down critical systems. Sweat dripped from his brow as he shouted orders to his team. "Divert auxiliary power to the shields. I don't care if we lose life support. We need those barriers holding." On the bridge, Drake kept one eye on the sensors and the other on his crew. Everyone was stretched thin, pushed to their limits. Yet no one complained. Each member of the Odyssey understood what was at stake, not just their lives, but the fate of Earth itself. "We can't keep this up forever," Monroe said quietly, breaking the tense silence. "Sooner or later, they'll box us in." Drake didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to Ross. "How soon can we use the frequency pulse again?" Ross hesitated, glancing at her datapad. "Not immediately. The system needs time to recharge, at least 30 minutes. "That's too long," Drake muttered. He tapped his finger against the railing, thinking fast. Then an idea struck him. What about targeting multiple ships at once? Could we modify the pulse to affect more than one shield? Ross blinked, startled by the question. I suppose it's possible, but it would require recalibrating the emitter array. And there's no guarantee it will work without overloading our own systems. Do it, Drake ordered. We don't have the luxury of playing it safe. If we can cripple even half their fleet, it might give us a fighting chance. Ross nodded, already heading back to the science lab. As she left, Drake turned to Monroe. Plot a course to bring us within range of their main formation. Once Ross is ready, we'll make our move. Monroe raised an eyebrow. You're planning to go straight at them. We don't have a choice, Drake replied. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. If we wait too long, they'll overwhelm us. Better to strike hard and fast while we still can. For the next 20 minutes, the Odyssey played a deadly game of cat and mouse, darting between asteroids and narrowly avoiding enemy fire. The Exitherians grew bolder, sending smaller ships to probe the field. Each time, Drake ordered the crew to hold steady, waiting for the right moment. Finally, Ross returned to the bridge, her expression grim but determined. It's ready, she said. But like I said, it's risky. If the emitter overloads, it could take out half the ship. Drake met her gaze. Understood. Let's do it. As the Odyssey emerged from the asteroid field, the Exitherian fleet came fully into view. Dozens of ships, their weapons trained on the tiny human warship. Drake took a deep breath. All hands, brace for impact. Fire when ready. The pulse surged forward, a shimmering wave of energy that washed over the enemy fleet. One by one, their shields flickered and collapsed. Cheers erupted on the bridge, but Drake silenced them with a single word. Again. The battle wasn't over yet. The Odyssey clung to the shadows of the asteroid field, its battered hull groaning under the stress of constant movement. Captain Alan Drake stared at the view screen, watching the Exitherian fleet tighten their net around them. The enemy ships were methodical, sweeping through the debris with calculated precision. Every second they stayed hidden was a gift, but gifts didn't last forever. We can't keep running, Lieutenant Rachel Monroe muttered, her fingers dancing over the tactical console. They'll find us sooner or later. Dr. Emily Ross stood nearby, her face pale but resolute. She had been working furiously since the first barrage, analyzing data from the damaged Exitherian cruiser. Now she stepped forward, clutching a data pad tightly in her hands. Captain, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I think I've found something. Drake turned to her immediately. What is it? Ross hesitated, glancing at the screen behind her. When we hit their lead cruiser earlier, I managed to extract some telemetry from the wreckage. Their shields, they're not as perfect as we thought. There's a frequency, a specific resonance that causes instability in their energy barriers. Monroe frowned. You mean we can break through their shields? Not exactly, Ross admitted. But if we target them with this frequency, it could overload their systems temporarily, long enough for us to do real damage. Drake's eyes narrowed. How reliable is this? It's theoretical, Ross said quickly. But based on the readings, it should work. We just need to fine-tune the calculations and deliver the pulse precisely. Drake glanced at Monroe, who was already pulling up simulations on her console. Her brow furrowed as she ran numbers. After a moment, she looked up. It's risky, sir. If we miss, they'll adapt faster than we can try again. We don't have a choice, Drake replied firmly. He turned back to Ross. How long will it take to prepare? A few hours, she said. Maybe less if I have help. Drake nodded. Do it. Monroe, you assist Dr. Ross. Carter, keep the engines ready. We're going to need every ounce of speed once we make our move. As Ross and Monroe retreated to the science lab, Drake moved to the helm station. The young officer manning the controls, Ensign Daniel Hayes, glanced up nervously. How are we holding up out here? Drake asked. Hayes swallowed hard. For now, they haven't pinpointed our exact location, but they're getting closer. Another direct hit like before, and we won't recover. Drake placed a hand on the ensign's shoulder. "Stay sharp. You're doing fine." Hours passed in tense silence. The crew worked tirelessly, preparing for what might be their only chance to turn the tide. In the science lab, Ross and Monroe pored over equations, debating adjustments to the frequency pulse. On the bridge, Drake kept one eye on the enemy fleet and the other on the clock. Outside, the Exetherians continued their relentless search, firing blindly into the asteroid field in hopes of flushing out their prey. Finally, Ross emerged from the lab, exhaustion etched across her face. "We're ready," she announced. "The pulse is calibrated. All we need is a clear shot." Drake nodded. "Monroe, plot an intercept course. Hayes, get us into position." The Odyssey slipped silently from its hiding place, skirting the edge of the asteroid belt. Ahead, a lone Exetherian patrol ship drifted lazily, unaware of the danger closing in. Drake gave the order, and the warship surged forward, its weapons charging. "Target locked," Monroe said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Ready to fire." Drake took a deep breath. "Do it." The Odyssey unleashed the frequency pulse, a shimmering wave of energy that rippled through space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Exetherian shift shields flickered violently and collapsed. Before the enemy could react, the Odyssey fired again, striking the unprotected hull. The patrol ship erupted in a brilliant explosion, sending debris spiraling into the void. On the bridge, cheers erupted among the crew, but Drake silenced them with a raised hand. "Don't celebrate yet," he warned. "They'll know something's wrong. Get us out of here." As the Odyssey retreated into the safety of the asteroids, the Exetherian fleet stirred, their sensors scrambling to understand what had just happened. Drake allowed himself a small smile. They had struck a blow and proven the enemy wasn't invincible. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Odyssey unleashed its payload, sending streaks of energy slicing through space. The lead Exetherian cruiser shuddered under the impact, its shields flaring brightly. For a moment, it seemed like the attack might work. Then, the rest of the fleet reacted. Dozens of beams lanced out from the enemy ships, hammering the Odyssey shields. The entire ship rocked violently, throwing several crew members off balance. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and smoke began to fill the air. "Shields at 60%, Monroe yelled over the chaos. "They're locking onto us." "Evasive maneuvers," Drake commanded. "Get us behind that asteroid." The helmsman yanked the controls, spinning the ship sharply. The Odyssey narrowly avoided another barrage, disappearing behind a jagged rock formation. For a brief moment, the barrage ceased. Drake took a deep breath, gripping the railing in front of him. "Damage report." Carter wiped soot from his face. "Minor hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Life support holding steady. Engines still functional, but we can't keep taking hits like that." "We won't," Drake assured him. He turned to Monroe. "Did we disable their weapons?" "Partially," she replied. "Their main cannons are down, but secondary turrets are still active." It wasn't enough. The Exetherians were already regrouping, their ships spreading out to surround the asteroid field. Drake clenched his fists, knowing they couldn't stay hidden forever. "Dr. Ross," he said sharply, "we need an advantage. Anything you've got." Ross hesitated, then nodded. "I'm working on something. Give me a few minutes." Minutes were all they had. Outside, the Exetherians closed in, their massive forms blotting out the stars. Drake tightened his grip on the railing, determination burning in his chest. They weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. The Odyssey drifted silently through the void, its crew holding their breath as the Exetherian fleet came into view. The enemy ships were monstrous, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their sleek, angular designs glinted faintly in the light of Ta-Siti's distant sun. To the untrained eye, they looked invincible, But Captain Alan Drake wasn't untrained. He studied them carefully, searching for any weakness, no matter how small. "Tactical analysis ready," Lieutenant Rachel Monroe said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. She brought up a holographic display on the bridge, showing the positions and movements of the Scytherian ships. "They're moving in formation, just like we predicted. Heavy cruisers at the front, smaller escorts flanking the sides." Drake nodded, his jaw tightening. "Any sign of their flagship?" Monroe hesitated before answering. "Negative. If it's here, it's staying back for now." That worried Drake. The Exetherians' command ships were their most dangerous assets, equipped with weapons capable of obliterating entire planets. If the flagship was hiding, it meant the enemy was playing it smart, and that made them even more dangerous. "Chief Carter," Drake called out, turning to the engineering station. "How are the engines holding up?" Paul Carter glanced up from his console, wiping sweat from his brow. "Running hot, but stable. We've got enough juice for one big push if we need it." "Good. Keep them ready." Drake turned back to the view screen. "Dr. Ross, what about our defenses? Any updates on those shield modifications?" Emily Ross stepped forward, clutching a datapad. Her eyes flickered between the screen and Drake. "The upgrades are online, but I can't guarantee they'll hold against sustained fire. These shields weren't designed to withstand Scytherian weaponry." Drake exhaled slowly. Nothing about this mission was guaranteed. They all knew that. Still, he couldn't afford to let doubt creep in. Not now. Not when so much depended on them. "All right," he said firmly. "Here's the plan. We use the asteroid belt to mask our approach. Hit them hard and fast, then pull back before they can counter. We don't have the firepower to take them head-on, so we'll rely on speed and precision." The crew nodded, each member focused on their task. As the Odyssey maneuvered closer to the asteroid field, Drake felt a strange calm settle over him. This was it, the moment they'd been preparing for. There was no turning back. When they reached the edge of the asteroid belt, the ship's thrusters fired in short bursts, weaving between the massive rocks. The Exetherians hadn't noticed them yet, too busy maintaining their formation. Drake watched the enemy ships grow larger on the view screen, his mind racing through every possible scenario. "Target the lead cruiser," he ordered. "Focus fire on their weapon arrays. Disable them if you can." "Aye, sir," Monroe replied, her fingers flying across the controls. Torpedoes armed, phasers charged, and targeting systems locked onto the designated ship. Then, without warning, the first shot rang out, not from the Odyssey, but from the Exetherians. One of their smaller vessels had spotted the human warship slipping through the asteroids. Alarms blared across the bridge as red lights flashed. "They've seen us," Carter shouted. "Hold position." Drake barked, "Return fire." The Exetherians had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Their empire stretched across countless star systems, swallowing planets whole and leaving behind only silence. They were not just conquerors, they were destroyers. No one knew where they came from or why they sought to dominate everything in their path. All that mattered was their power, a force so overwhelming that resistance seemed futile. On Earth, people watched the stars with growing dread. News of fallen worlds reached them through broken signals and desperate broadcasts. Planets once teeming with life now lay barren, their populations either wiped out or absorbed into the Scytherian collective. Humanity had tried to stay hidden, hoping its small blue world would go unnoticed. But hope wasn't enough. The Exetherians were coming, and nothing could stop them. In response, Earth's leaders banded together. For years, they'd poured resources into building something capable of standing against the invaders, a warship unlike any other. It was called the SS Odyssey. Sleek and deadly, it carried weapons and technology far beyond anything humanity had ever created. Its crew was made up of the best and brightest, men and women who had trained for this moment their entire lives. At the center of it all stood Captain Alan Drake. Drake was not like other captains. He didn't wear his rank like armor or bark orders to assert authority. Instead, he led by example, earning the trust of those under him. His calm demeanor masked a sharp mind and an unshakable determination. When the United Earth Council gave him command of the Odyssey *, many doubted he was ready, but Drake proved them wrong every step of the way. The mission was simple yet impossible. Intercept the Scytherian fleet before it reached Earth. Delay them long enough for Earth's defenses to prepare. That was the official order. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The Odyssey * might be humanity's last chance. If they failed, Earth would burn. As the ship launched into the void of space, Drake stood on the bridge, staring at the view screen. Stars streaked past as the Odyssey * jumped to faster than light speed. Behind him, Lieutenant Rachel Monroe monitored the tactical displays, her fingers dancing over the controls. Chief Engineer Paul Carter ensured the engines ran smoothly, while Dr. Emily Ross pored over data, searching for anything that might give them an edge. Drake turned to his crew. "This isn't just about us," he said quietly. "It's about everyone back home. Every person looking up at the sky, wondering if we'll make it. We can't let them down." No one spoke, but the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Each member of the crew understood what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle. It was survival. And failure wasn't an option. Days passed as the Odyssey * raced toward Ta City, the designated interception point. Along the way, they studied everything they could about the Scytherians. Their ships were massive, bristling with weapons, and shielded by energy barriers that seemed impenetrable. Their tactics were brutal and efficient, designed to overwhelm opponents quickly. Against such an enemy, the Odyssey * looked tiny, a mere speck compared to the towering behemoths of the Scytherian fleet. But Drake refused to lose hope. He reminded himself, and his crew, that size didn't always matter. Speed, strategy, and courage could tip the scales. As the Odyssey * approached Ta City, the tension aboard the ship grew palpable. Everyone knew the fight ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine. And then, finally, they saw it. On the view screen, the Scytherian armada loomed large, a sea of darkness blotting out the stars. Drake took a deep breath and gave the order. Prepare for engagement. The battle was about to begin.